Hi, I'm Matt. Welcome to the screencast I put together to help explain a bit more about these two canvases I've made and what you can use them for. So, a little bit of background. Originally, these came from my course that I made called the Evidence-Based Redesign, which you can get on Udemy. And it's basically a way to try and help people who are kind of new to gathering different forms of data about their website, different forms of evidence. It's kind of a way of helping them sort of keep it focused and help them understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. Because it's so easy to get lost in a sort of world of facts and figures, stats about your site. Also, you end up watching user tests, you can get distracted by that, take that really importantly. Whereas I always think the most powerful way of using this data and all these different types of evidence you can gather is to kind of combine it, use it as one, and it kind of reinforces itself, and then the qualitative stuff and the quantitative stuff helps tell you different things that you want to know. So the idea here is we've got these two canvases, which are printable templates, so that you can take your findings, fill them in here, put them up on the walls, make it a bit more tangible. So if you're working in a team, it can be really useful so everyone can see what you're gathering from your research. Or if you're just working by yourself, it's a really good way of just quickly noting stuff down. Because actually often it's easier to kind of just quickly write notes while you've got stuff up on your computer screen, scribble down a few figures, help you see the patterns a bit more rather than having to start another doc, jump between different documents. So I'm just going to talk you through what the structure is of each of these templates and how to use them. So the first one is called the Behaviour canvas. This was originally called the Journey canvas. Maybe the idea being because you can have multiple of them to build up the journey that a user takes through your site. However, on its own, it's about describing user behavior on any given page. So the idea is that you have one of these per step in the flow that you're looking to design or redesign. And that page might be a single URL, or it might be a group of URLs, so it might be a template. And in there, you can put the name of it at the top. So this one might just be homepage, or it might be a search page or product page. So I can get the top left. You can mark how many steps there are, and then you can sort of helps you keep everything on a sort of page level. So when you come to do the design part, which you usually design sort of screen by screen, right? This way, all your research will be gathered screen by screen, so you can refer to it and check that as you're designing, you're ticking off the things that you found in your research. You're making sure your designs fit the solution. So that's why they're done on this sort of flow by flow, page by page basis. So the first one here, we can see these photos that I've sort of filled in using the canvas. So the first top left quadrant is for where you gather your page data. So this is like your Google Analytics data. And basically here, I'm just trying to sort of help you realize that data is rarely necessarily really good or really bad. Sometimes it really depends. So what we've got here is better than average or worse than average. So if this is a homepage, a landing page, then bounce rate is something that's relevant to that page. Bounce rate is less relevant to other pages in the flow, but for landing pages it's important. So it's a bit of data you might want to record here. And you can say, look, bounce rate is very low, so you know that something's working, people aren't leaving. Worse than average, you could say that your time on page is lower than everyone else. So is that good, is that bad? Hard to know at this stage, but worth recording. And you can see maybe specific events, you can record them. Basically anything that stands out as you look through data on this page, on something like Google Analytics, record it here as, something to look into and maybe something you can find out answers about. Next, you might want to look through some heat maps on your site. Heat maps are an increasingly popular tool that's sort of bundled in with analytics software and visitor recording software. And this is useful for starting to take what was quant data before and sort of overlay it onto a page. So here you could say, it's kind of like better than average, worse than average. Here, looking at the positives and the negatives, which are where is it that users are dwelling, so where seems to be working quite well, and where is it that users are missing, so where possibly a candidate's for content to either be dropped or completely redesigned. So that's when you start to gather this. So now you're taking, hopefully starting to answer some of the stats you saw on the first quadrant. Maybe you're starting to get some answers here as to why people aren't clicking certain buttons, and why people aren't spending time on page, things like that. On visitor recordings, then, this is a slightly different section, because with visitor recordings, it's all about just sitting down and watching them, and then starting to see which behaviours you observe happening fairly often. And they can be a bit more complex behaviours that you can't really capture just in a single data point. And they kind of often evolve over time, so you kind of have to watch and see if people are actually doing them or not. And you can keep some sort of tally of them here as you go through. So there's a little bit of space here. You may need to sort of get another sheet for this if you've got a very detailed page. But this gives you a kind of basic starting point where you can start to fill in a tally of popular things that people are doing. So this will start to tell you, how people are going about using the site. And it again will give you more clues that. So here, look, people are scrolling up and down. Something you couldn't really tell so much on analytics or on heat maps. You can see that people are going up and down, maybe repetitive behaviours. So they're probably looking for something, getting a bit lost. And if you're seeing a lot of that, then perhaps your information isn't standing out clearly enough, or it's missing some vital information. So this is all about just tallying up common things you spot in your recordings. Then there's user testing. So as you run user testing on your site, here you can record some of the main behaviours that you're observing page by page. And here there's a little sort of key for different letters, because there's a few different types of things you can spot in user testing. Generally, I classify them as 4 different things: either usability, desirability, bugs, or positives. So usability issue is when people kind of are struggling to know how to go onto the next step of a flow, perhaps. Desirability is something more like, they just really love your photography, your images, the branding looks great, so you could sort of mark that down as a positive. Or if they really dislike it, it's a desirability issue. A bug is when something's just plain broken, so maybe a pop-up doesn't work, something like that. And then a positive is just worth recording the positives because it's easy for user testing to focus solely on the negatives. But sometimes it reveals some good positives that you want to keep in your designs and not just stuff you want to remove. Then there's, if you do any competitor analysis, if you start looking at other home pages, for example, in this case, you could record what are the sort of key themes that come out of that. I would suggest doing a separate piece of work on your competitor analysis, a proper thought through look, study, not just a quick glance at other sites. But from that, you might want to just distill it down so you've then got all of your points. And then at the end of that, you'll have a sort of page, hopefully per step of your flow, where you can now see step by step what the issues are and perhaps some of the positives and what other people are doing for like your homepage, search page, product page, checkout, things like that. And then when you come to design it, you can refer back to all that. Your team can see all the information you've been gathering, and you can start to build a real picture of what user behavior looks like on your site. To become quite a powerful thing, and it just helps you sort of make some of this stuff that's hard to kind of grasp at the beginning a lot more tangible and useful. So yeah, that's the behavior canvas. So whilst you're making several of them, there's only one audience canvas per flow that you're designing, and this is really just to help you quickly summarize who your users are, because again, it can be easy to sort of forget. You're not designing for yourself, you're also probably not designing for everybody in the world. And sometimes you don't have personas well worked out, or sometimes your guess at who your users are isn't quite right. So this is just a good sort of North Star centering point. And for this, all you need to do really is just go into Google Analytics, and it helps you summarize those things. You can do up more with this later, you could investigate this further, but this is just a basic starting point to make sure everyone on the team is aware of who the users are. There's also a dates field in the top right for you to fill in. It's worth sort of noting this is, true as of this date. There was also one on the behavior canvas as well. Worth just saying, this is for the last quarter of 2018 or something, so that it's always somewhat time relevant. I usually suggest for audience data looking over about a quarter to sort of balance out any weird fluctuations. And yeah, this is just a case of going through a tool like Google Analytics and just finding from there the basic sort of demographic information you can gather, like whether your users are male or female, what your top age groups look like, what the device split looks like. That's really useful to keep people front of mind. Often clients and people can become very fixated on something like desktop, when increasingly mobile is the place where a lot of web interactions happen. And then also letting you, summarizing what countries are big for you. Sometimes there might be big representation from a country you weren't quite aware of. But this is a quick summary. It's about top threes. It's not necessarily about going into vast detail, but it should keep you focused that, in this case, you're broadly designing for more of a female, kind of middle-aged, sort of, 30s to 40s mobile user in the UK. There's also space at the bottom for survey notes. If you do start to gather any more detail about who these users are through surveys, so perhaps starting to dig into exactly where they live, or a bit more about their actual behaviours, it could be useful to summarise them on here, so you've got that. And then that's it, basically. That's the end of my sort of summary of these two canvases. I hope they're useful for you. The idea is just to kind of be something that you can really quickly get to grips with and use. So I hope that you do.